Our second month at the clinic started off busy and it never really slowed down. The first week of our second month at the Rescue One clinic, we seemed to have a theme: animals that were having trouble using their legs. Our not-so-little H kittens went to their own foster homes. A whole new family of cats came in for help, and as usual, lots more surgeries and office visits. Saturday evening, Rescue One received a call from someone who found a dog on their property that appeared to have something seriously wrong. After contacting Rescue One, the emergency rescue team responded and took the dog to the emergency vet. We decided to call him Nash. After an examination and some x-rays, they weren't really sure exactly what was going on. Based on their findings, they guessed he was about a year old. They found no injuries that would indicate he had been hit by a car, but his temperature was around 106.1, about 4 degrees higher than it should be. Their best guess was that he had been given or gotten into something toxic, possibly methamphetamines. After his blood work, they found that he tested positive for marijuana and benzodiazepines. It was looking like someone had either intentionally drugged poor Nash or he got into something that he shouldn't have. Early the next morning, we were contacted about an injured cat. A lady had let her dog out in her fenced backyard, not realizing that a neighborhood cat had hopped in to check the place out. Her Great Dane grabbed a hold of the cat before she knew what was happening. The poor kitty managed to escape, and she was able to get her dog back in the house. She took the obviously injured cat to the emergency vet and contacted Rescue One. When a member of the emergency team arrived, they found that he had a rabies tag from Safe Spay and Neuter Clinic. This was exciting since maybe this meant he had a family to care for him. Everyone was looking forward to contacting Safe to find out who the rabies tag traced back to. At the emergency vet, they took x-rays and were surprised to find that he had no broken bones at all other than a fractured jaw, even though he seemed unable to even stand. They gave him some pain meds to keep him more comfortable. After watching Nash for the night, the emergency vet was rethinking their diagnosis. His fever was gone, and although he was obviously not a normal dog, he didn't seem to be in distress. In fact, now that he was dry and out of the freezing cold, he seemed happy. They noticed some calluses on his legs and elbows, leading them now to believe that maybe the test showed a false positive for drugs, or possibly they were being used as an attempt to control some sort of permanent muscle disorder. We were glad to hear that he hadn't been injured, but no one was quite sure how to move forward for this poor guy who couldn't even hold himself up. It was decided that he would be hospitalized at the Rescue One Clinic for observation so a plan could be formulated. On Monday, we were contacted by a couple who found a surprise when they were doing some yard work. While weed-eating along their property line, they heard meowing coming from a camper up next to their fence on their neighbor's property. They looked through a window to see if a cat had gotten trapped inside, only to find multiple cats and kittens staring back at them. They wanted to help get the kitties into a better situation. They went to their neighbor's door to ask what the story was and if the kitties needed help. The elderly couple who owned the camper said that 3 of the 4 cats had shown up at their house were females, and all had ended up pregnant at the same time. All the kittens were born around the same time, and all eventually developed goopy eyes and runny noses. They said that one by one, most of the kittens had disappeared or passed away, and the only way they knew to keep them safe was to lock them in the camper. We knew we had to help this poor little family. Our first priority, though, was poor Reuben, who was going to require surgery for a possible hernia in his abdominal wall. We traced the rabies tag to the person who we hoped was his owner. Sadly, they had only neutered him to be kind. Reuben was a stray cat that lived in her neighborhood, who she neutered to help reduce his chances of being injured or contracting a virus while fighting with other cats, and to prevent him from helping to create more strays. We prepped him for surgery, and Dr. K began searching for internal tears. She located 2 almost immediately and repaired them, but soon realized it was going to be far more complicated than expected. By the time she was done with surgery, she had repaired 5 abdominal hernias. Poor Reuben was in for a long road of healing. The new family of kitties arrived, and everyone was treated for fleas and worms, and we started the kittens on a round of antibiotics. We set them up in our isolation room. We carefully soaked the kittens' eyes with a warm cloth and cleaned all the crusties off, then applied an ointment to help them heal. We repeated this daily until they started to clear on their own. After the adults were spayed and had begun to heal, they returned back home. The kittens, Silas, Stan, Sylvester, and Serenity, were a little shy but warmed up to us in no time. Their eyes cleared up quickly, and before long they went to a foster home. We agreed to help get the adults spayed and take the kittens into the rescue. We had hoped to take in the whole group, but the elderly couple had become very attached to the mother cats and said they wanted to continue caring for them, but didn't want them to have any more kittens. They were giving them daily food and water and had the camper that would be left open for shelter. We agreed, and the nice couple who had discovered them in the camper agreed to bring the whole family to us. It was hard to do, but we said goodbye to the H kitties this week. Mama Harlow was ready for a break. She headed to a foster, while her kittens divided into two groups and went to new foster homes of their own. We also said goodbye to Fran as she began a new journey. We will miss her, and we wish her lots of luck in her new position. It was a very busy week as we cared for and loved on the new hospitalized kitty family, Reuben and Nash, along with the semi-feral Purr Palace residents, the H kitties, and our usual load of surgery patients, and saw lots of sweet babies for appointment. We are so thankful for our volunteers, who we literally could not do this without, especially on weeks like this. It was a good thing the S kittens found a foster quickly because we needed our isolation room the very next week. Animal control took in a mom and puppies who tested positive for parvo. Dogs with parvo absolutely cannot stay in animal control because of how contagious it is. We knew if we said no, it would most likely mean a death sentence for them. We moved them in and immediately began treatment, but unfortunately it was too late for one of them. Within hours of arrival, one of the pups, we called her Sunshine, passed away. The other three, who were named Lollipop, Rainbow, and Starlight, were actually in good shape though. Mama Dog was named Beautiful and was showing no signs of parvo, which is not surprising for an adult dog. All four were eating and drinking well. By the end of the week, they were doing well enough that they were all able to go into foster homes. Our next emergency was a little different. Our autoclave, the machine we rely on to sterilize our surgical equipment, was having trouble. This was a big problem since we were still doing at least 6 surgeries every day, Monday through Thursday. With all the animals coming in to rescue one, we'd be in big trouble if we couldn't spay and neuter them so that they could be adopted. In a scramble, we searched for other options and reached out for help from our amazing supporters. Luckily, we had what we needed to at least make it through the week, and with the help of our incredible donors, we had enough to order a new one by the end of the day. It was unbelievable. And by the weekend, we had a new autoclave, and we were able to continue with surgeries as planned. While Nash was showing no sign of improvement, he was showing how happy he is all the time. More testing and research gave us no answers. Our only hope was that with time and rehab, maybe he'd be able to control his legs well enough to have a quality life. We were so excited for him, though, as an amazing foster came forward willing to use her special skills to not only work with him, but also to give him a place to stay. His foster works with farm animals who need physical therapy, so she was absolutely perfect for him. Reuben, however, was doing much better. He seemed to be in much less pain, he was beginning to move around, and was eating and drinking much better than he had been. His personality was really starting to show, and we found out what an incredibly sweet cat he is. He was still unable to hold his back end up, but could scoot around well enough to use his litter box when needed and get where he wanted to go. While our emergency rescue team was out helping with a dog that had been abandoned, they discovered that there was also a cat that had been left behind as well. We had no room left, but couldn't leave her behind. We contacted CARE, and together we teamed up to save her. We brought her to the clinic and set her up in an office until we could spay her, and then CARE would take her until she could find a home. It really does take a village. We are always looking for more fosters since it seems there are always more animals needing help. At the end of the week, we heard from someone we had previously helped. The person who feeds the feral colony where our office kitty Chucky came from sent word that someone had dumped not only another cat off in her yard, but also her 5 tiny kittens. To make it worse, one of them appeared to be injured, and was dragging his tiny back legs when he moved. This poor lady was already doing all she could to care for the colony on very limited resources. We agreed to take them immediately so we could not only get the tiny babies out of the cold, but also hopefully help the injured baby. They arrived at the very end of the day on Friday. We set them up in a quarantine kennel along with a tag-along kitten who was just a little older that had been dumped along with them. The little orange kitten was definitely dragging his back end, but it looked like a birth defect rather than an injury. He didn't seem to be too bothered by it and played with his siblings like everything was fine. We cleaned up their little eyes and noses and started them on antibiotics and eye cream for a mild upper respiratory infection that they had. Our third week began with a new addition to our team. Our new receptionist and all-around clinic helper started. We were so excited to welcome Hannah to our daily chaos. Over the weekend, a very skinny, stray dog was picked up by the trapping team. He had been reported several times over the previous week or so, but no one was able to get close enough to him. He was very underweight, so he came in for a quick checkup Monday morning and to be scanned for a microchip. Sadly, he was yet another who had no chip, so we had to rely on the internet to find his home, which we never found. So now he's a Rescue One doggy named Otis looking for his forever home. The third week of February also brought yet another set of parvo puppies. Cupid and Valentine were two more babies dumped off to fend for themselves while feeling miserable. These poor pups came in very down and out, not wanting to eat or drink. We were so worried little Cupid wouldn't make it because he was so tiny. Just a couple days later, we were contacted about another very small pup with parvo who needed help. Her people took her to the vet because she was sick, but were unable to have her treated. Since we already had parvo pups to care for that were so small they only took up one spot, we put her in the kennel next to them and began treatment. Unfortunately, as Cupid was quickly beginning to feel better, Aphrodite, as we named her, was going downhill just as fast. She was hospitalized at the emergency vet overnight, where she barely pulled through, but then passed away the following day at the clinic. Throughout the week, Valentine declined some as he hit the worst parts of parvo, but stayed strong. These little pups were not our only scare this week, though. Bunshine, a Pyrenees Shepherd mix puppy, came into the clinic first thing in the morning almost lifeless. This usually energetic girl had been acting a little funny the night before. She had been wobbly and not as interested in her dinner as her foster had become used to. When her foster mom woke the next morning, she found her even more stumbly and very confused. She rushed her to the clinic. Her body temperature had dropped and her eyes were open, but they didn't appear to actually see what was going on around her. We immediately got her set up on the heat mat, surrounded with rice socks and blankets. We checked her temperature and began fluids. Dr. K began anti-seizure meds, as all of her symptoms pointed to possibly enduring multiple seizures. 2 doses seemed to help her relax, but still didn't pull her out of it. Finally, IV seizure meds were added to her fluid lines, and her eyes began to focus on what was going on around her. She was exhausted. The rest of the day was spent resting and being observed. By the end of the day, she was eating on her own. She went home for the night with no more issues. The following morning, she came back in for further observation, but she was completely back to normal. It was amazing to see this pup that had looked so hopeless just the day before, bouncing around and barking at all the other dogs. Seizures can be unpredictable. Sometimes an animal can have one with no explanation, and then never have another. We are hoping that this is the case with Funshine. Nash was loving life with his new foster. He seemed to be gaining just a small amount of mobility, but still relied mostly on his foster carrying most of his weight for him by holding up the handle of his life vest. He went in for further testing with a neurologist and was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, meaning spinal fluid builds up in the brain, and they also discovered that his cerebellum, which controls movement, is 1/20th the size it should be. The neurologist recommended trying steroids and a medication to help decrease his fluid production to see if there was any improvement. Among our surgery patients this week, we got to see our H-kitties from the kitty clubhouse room. Hudson, Hamilton, Hansley, Harper, and Harrison have gotten so big, and now it's their turn to be spayed and neutered, tested, and vaccinated so they can move to their forever homes. Lucky for Hudson and Harrison, they have applications to be adopted as soon as they're ready. We were so excited to see Twyla, our strong mama from the pound who cared for her puppies through kennel cough, heartworms, and abandonment. She was in for her first round of meds for heartworm treatment, looking much better than last we saw her. Cubby and Bree, 2 of the dogs that had recently been picked up by our emergency rescue team, were both off stray hold and ready to take the first step in beginning their new lives. Both would be fixed, vaccinated, tested for heartworm, microchipped, and sent home with preventatives so that they would be ready for the next adoption event. We got to play with lots of puppies that were ready for surgeries this week. The monkey pups and the fiesta pups were all fixed. Davy, Michael, Mickey, and Peter Monkey sat quietly while waiting for their surgeries, while Taco, Guacamole, Queso, Margarita, and Tequila made sure everyone knew when they were there waiting their turn. We saw Silas, Beretta, Gianna, Goose, Lawson, and so many more pooches and kitties we were honored to meet at the start of their new journeys. The kitties that came in at the end of the previous week were starting to feel a little better, and the little orange one was stealing all of our hearts. His little legs weren't normal, but he seemed to be getting around alongside his siblings. The older kitten enjoyed helping with the babies, but was obviously ready for some friends her own size to play with. We were happy to find her a foster home with some older kitties. For this litter, we went with Taffy, Tessa, Tori, Tobias, Talia, Tommy, and Tiny Tim, since we were on the letter T. We didn't have to wait long for the next litter either. Before the end of the week, we were brought in the U litter, another family living out in the cold with a major upper respiratory infection. The litter size had already decreased as kittens passed. Unable to fight off the infection, Uma and her kittens Yuli, Umar, and Usher came in to get started on some antibiotics and eye ointment. This week, we also began a new project. Over the weekend, we had been contacted about a very large colony of cats that needed to find new homes right away. A lady that had been caring for these kitties and many more had to leave her home and had been trying since October to place around 50 cats. She had placed some that we really hope were spayed and neutered, but the 20 to 30 that were left were having trouble finding a place. Once again, we teamed up with CARE to try and help. This many kitties was going to be a process, but with kitten season upon us, we knew that if we didn't act fast, the number would quadruple. With our new clinic, but nowhere for the kitties to go long-term until they were adopted, we could help by spaying and neutering and giving rabies vaccines. CARE said that they could take on the other half of the equation by testing and vaccinating and finding homes. With a plan in place, we started with 10. Victor, Vans, Vivian, Violet, Versace, Viana, Vidalia, Vaticus, Vegas, and Veronica headed to the office for flea and tick and worm preventative. They all seemed terrified at first, but in no time most were demanding love and enjoying their new indoor life. We worked them in on top of our normal surgery load, and by the following Monday they were on their way to CARE to be adopted. Well, all except two. One of our employees fell in love with and adopted, and the other appeared to be pregnant, so she stayed behind to be able to have her kittens. Somehow, it was already the last week of February. On par with the rest of the month, the week started with an emergency. Someone found a beagle puppy the night before who had apparently been hit by a car. This poor baby was in very bad shape. They rushed him to the emergency clinic. They made him comfortable and took x-rays, but it appeared the injuries he sustained were mainly affecting his brain. They recommended euthanasia, but we wanted to give him a little time to see if he could pull through. We brought him to the clinic from the emergency clinic and monitored him through the morning. It was very clear that they were right. This poor guy may or may not be in pain, but it was hard to tell since he was non-responsive. We had to make the heartbreaking decision to let him go. After a hard start to the week, it was nice to see some more familiar faces. Serenity was back for a check on her eye, a leftover side effect of the upper respiratory infection her and her litter mates had when they arrived. Her eye was having trouble making a full recovery. Dr. K said she should be looking much better after another week or so of her eye ointment. We got to meet a few of the pugs coming from a breeder who was shutting down his operation. Bristol came in for a visit with her litter of 5, Harley, Vance, Hines, Willie G, and Dinah. This sweet mama was nothing but love, and her wiggly babies were pure adorableness. All were vaccinated and given preventatives. As the month came to an end, everything seemed to finally be settling down. The U kitties had made a complete turnaround and were looking so much better after a week of eye meds and love. Cupid and Valentine were doing much better, eating, drinking, and having solid stools. We were so relieved to have some good news. Seeing babies like these feeling so much better after watching them fight for their lives makes all the heartache worth it. They were finally able to move into a foster home of their own. Murph and Diesel Clutch came in after being returned. We were so sad for this sweet pair. Murph had been adopted years ago and bonded strongly with the resident dog, Diesel. Now they were both being surrendered, Murph for the second time. Their vaccines were updated and they were retested for heartworms. Unfortunately, Murph's test came back positive, meaning he would now have to go through heartworm treatment before he could be adopted. The tea kitties were continuing to grow and doing great. Tiny Tim was getting around great, although his legs were no longer his only issue. Now that they were big enough that their mom wasn't helping them potty, we were noticing that he was having trouble controlling when and where he defecated. We began monitoring to see if we had a new problem on our hands. Our purr palace was beginning to look like it was full of cats instead of kittens. Sweet, Chick, and Duck went on a trial adoption, but unfortunately were a bit more of a project than the adopter was looking for. After a week of them hiding and being unwilling to try to be social, they were returned. We are still hoping to find homes, or even shop homes, for these sweet but much less social kitties. Beautiful Chick and Duck are sisters that would love a home together. Winnie and handsome Jace would love to find a place together. And Joker, who's a little more social, would love to be adopted with any other kitten. His sister Jubilee is very friendly and would make a great partner for him. Kittens, especially those that are less social, do much better in pairs. If you could give our semi-feral kittens or any other of the Rescue One cats or dogs a loving home, please visit rescue1springfield.com and fill out an adoption application right away. Thank you so much to our community for your continued support.